doors closed softly behind her. No chains, no guards shouting orders, just the quiet movement of silk and sandals across polished stone. The corridors of the palace swallow sound, designed that way long before she was born. In this place, power moves quietly. She knows something is wrong. No one meets her eyes. The servants step aside too quickly. Even the women waiting inside the chamber stand with a stillness that feels rehearsed. For a moment, nothing happens. Then, someone reaches for her arms. What follows is so calculated, so deliberate, that even the ancient historian who recorded it centuries later hesitated before putting it into words. He had written about wars, massacres, cities burned to the ground. But this was something different, because the woman inside that room was not an enemy, not a traitor, not even a political rival. She was a member of the royal family, and the order that sealed her fate did not come from a battlefield or a council of generals. It came from inside the palace itself, from a queen. But the chain of events that led to that room began years earlier, on the edge of the Aegean Sea, where the most powerful man on earth watched his empire begin to slip out of his control. And once that process began, no one inside the Persian court would escape it untouched. At the beginning of the 5th century BCE, the Persian Empire was the largest political system the world had ever seen. Its territory stretched from the deserts of Egypt to the mountains of Central Asia, from the plains of Mesopotamia to the distant frontier of the Indus River. Tens of millions of people lived under a single authority. At the top of that system stood one man, Xerxes I. To his subjects, he was not simply a ruler. He was the great king, the king of kings, the chosen guardian of order in a universe constantly threatened by chaos. Persian kingship was not only political, it was spiritual. The monarchy claimed legitimacy through the favor of Ahura Mazda, the divine force associated with truth and cosmic order. A successful king proved that favor through victory, stability, and expansion. Failure raised uncomfortable questions. Questions no one inside the court dared ask aloud. But everyone could see the signs. In 480 BCE, Xerxes launched what was, by ancient standards, an almost unimaginable military operation. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers, drawn from dozens of nations, marched westward. Engineers cut canals through peninsulas. Bridges of ships were built across the narrow channel, separating Asia from Europe. The invasion was meant to finish a task his father had started. Darius I had attempted to conquer the Greek city-states a decade earlier and failed. Xerxes intended to correct that humiliation permanently. For a moment, it looked like he might succeed. Greek resistance collapsed at the mountain pass of Battle of Thermopylae. The Persian army moved south. Athens was evacuated and burned. From the perspective of most observers in the ancient world, the outcome seemed inevitable. A handful of divided city-states could not possibly defeat the largest empire on earth. But wars often turn on geography, and a narrow stretch of water changed everything. The decisive moment arrived in the straits near the island of Salamis. Greek commanders lured the Persian fleet into waters too tight for its numbers to maneuver. Ships collided, oars shattered. Signals could not travel across the crowded formation. The fleet that had carried the empire across the sea began destroying itself. Xerxes watched the battle from a throne placed deliberately on a hillside overlooking the strait. He had chosen the location so every captain below would know the king was observing them. Instead, he watched the destruction unfold in front of him. When it was over, Persian naval power in the region was crippled. And without control of the sea, the massive land army in Greece could not be supplied. Xerxes withdrew east. The campaign ended. For the first time in generations, the great king had promised conquest and returned without it. Empires rarely collapse immediately after a defeat. The Persian state remained enormous. Its administrative system continued to function. Taxes were still collected. Governors still ruled provinces across 3 continents. But inside royal courts, perception is as important as reality. For years after the Greek campaign, Xerxes avoided major military operations. Instead, he turned inward. Construction projects expanded the great ceremonial capital at Persepolis. Monuments grew larger, titles grew longer. Relief carvings depicted the king receiving tribute from dozens of nations. These displays were not vanity. They were reassurance, a way of reminding everyone who still ruled the world. But power that withdraws from external conflict often redirects itself elsewhere. And inside the palace, the king's attention settled on someone he should never have pursued. Among Xerxes' relatives was a powerful nobleman named Macystes. Macystes governed the eastern province of Bactria, a strategically vital region on the empire's frontier. He had commanded troops during the Greek campaign and maintained influence among the Persian military elite. He was also married, and according to the Greek historian Herodotus, the king became obsessed with Macystes' wife. Her name is never recorded. History remembers the king, the queen, the generals, the conspirators, but the woman whose life would eventually be destroyed is left anonymous. When Xerxes attempted to pursue her, she refused. That decision alone required extraordinary courage. Rejecting the most powerful man on earth was not something people survived easily, but forcing the issue carried political risks. Macystes was not a minor noble whose family could disappear without consequences. He commanded soldiers. He governed territory. If the king humiliated him publicly, the repercussions might spread far beyond the palace. So, Xerxes changed tactics. Instead of direct pursuit, he rearranged the structure of the royal family itself. Royal marriages in the Achaemenid dynasty were tools of politics. Alliances were reinforced by binding branches of the royal house together. Xerxes arranged for his son, Crown Prince Darius, to marry Macystes' daughter. Her name was Artaint. On the surface, the match looked ordinary, but it had a hidden effect. It brought Macystes' family physically closer to the king's household. Visits, ceremonies, seasonal migrations between royal capitals. Suddenly the people Xerxes wanted near him had legitimate reasons to be present. What he had created was proximity. And proximity has consequences. Somewhere within the palace walls, the king's attention shifted. The woman he had once pursued was no longer the focus. Instead, Xerxes began an affair with Artaint, the daughter of his brother and the wife of his own son. 3 separate boundaries collapsed at once: family, politics, dynasty. Why she agreed remains one of the unanswered questions of the ancient record. Perhaps she feared refusing him. Perhaps she believed closeness to the king offered protection. Perhaps she saw opportunity. Or perhaps she had no real choice at all. The historical sources leave her motives silent. What they do record is the moment when secrecy became impossible. During one of their meetings, Xerxes made a promise, a royal oath. He swore that Artaint could ask for any gift she wished, and it would be granted. In the Persian world, such oaths were not casual statements. They invoked divine authority. Breaking them was not merely embarrassing. It threatened the king's legitimacy itself. Xerxes expected a conventional request: jewelry, land, gold. Instead, Artainta asked for a robe. Not just any robe, the one he was wearing. It had been woven personally by the queen, a mistress. In the royal court, everyone knew the garment. It symbolized the bond between king and queen. If another woman appeared wearing it, the meaning would be unmistakable. The robe would expose the affair without a single word being spoken. Xerxes understood immediately. He tried to bargain. Cities, wealth, privileges no woman in the empire had ever possessed. Artaint refused everything. She wanted only the robe. Bound by his oath, the king handed it over. And with that gesture, the secret entered the open world. The queen noticed. She said nothing. No confrontation. No public outrage. Instead, a mistress waited. She was not merely the king's wife. She came from one of the most powerful noble families in the empire. Her father had helped place Xerxes' father on the throne decades earlier. Her position did not depend entirely on her husband. Inside the court, she had allies. Informants. Influence. A direct attack on our client might have created a scandal the royal family could not control. So Amestris chose another target. The woman Xerxes had originally pursued. Macistes's wife. In the Persian court, the king's birthday was marked by a ritual feast. During that celebration, tradition required the king to grant requests made by members of the royal household. Refusing them openly would break a long-standing custom. Amestris waited for that day. When the feast began and the court gathered nobles, generals, priests, governors, she made her request. She asked the king to give her Macistes's wife. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Xerxes attempted to change her mind. He offered alternatives. But the queen had chosen her moment carefully. To refuse her now would undermine the very traditions that reinforced his authority. The king gave his consent, and the woman who had once refused him was taken into the queen's custody. What happened next shocked even ancient historians accustomed to brutality. According to Herodotus, Amestris ordered a punishment designed not simply to kill, but to erase a person's identity piece by piece. The woman was mutilated. Specific parts of her body were targeted features associated with dignity, beauty, social presence. She was left alive. Then she was sent back, carried through the same palace corridors where she had once walked as a respected member of the royal family. The purpose was unmistakable. This was not vengeance alone. It was a message. In a court where power depended on reputation and fear, the queen had demonstrated exactly what challenging her authority could cost. When Macistes's saw what had been done to his wife, the result was immediate. He gathered his sons and left the capital. His destination was Bactria, the province he governed. There he could raise an army. A royal prince with military experience, regional loyalty, and a personal grievance was now moving toward open rebellion. If he reached Bactria, the Persian Empire might face civil war. Xerxes responded quickly. Royal cavalry intercepted Macistes's before he reached the eastern frontier. He and his sons were killed on the road. An entire branch of the royal family disappeared in a single day. Not in battle, not in revolution, but through a chain of personal decisions inside the palace. The empire continued. Administrators kept working. Tribute still flowed to the treasury. Construction continued at Persepolis. From the outside, little appeared to have changed. But the people closest to power had witnessed something unsettling. They had seen the king manipulated by his own customs. They had seen royal rituals turned into weapons. They had seen a personal scandal destroy a family that once stood at the center of the empire. Trust inside the court began to erode. And when trust disappears near absolute power, something else eventually replaces it. 14 years later, in 465 BCE, the final consequence arrived. Xerxes was murdered inside his own bedroom. The men responsible were not foreign enemies. They were members of his inner circle. Artabanus, the officer responsible for protecting the king, and a palace official who controlled access to his chambers. The people entrusted with his safety decided the empire would function better without him. His son, Artaxerxes I, eventually secured the throne after a violent struggle within the palace. The dynasty survived, but the damage inside the royal court never fully healed. Our taint disappears from the historical record. So does the mutilated woman whose refusal began the chain of events. Their stories end in silence. Yet the episode remained preserved in ancient texts for more than 2,000 years. Not because it was the largest battle of the era, not because it changed the borders of the empire, but because it revealed something darker about power. Empires are often remembered through wars and conquests, but sometimes their most revealing moments happen in quiet rooms, far from the battlefield, where pride, jealousy, and fear can reshape the lives of entire families. And occasionally, the fate of an empire begins with something as small as a single promise that should never have been made. If stories like this, the forgotten corners of ancient history, are the ones you want explored in depth, consider subscribing to the channel. These documentaries exist because people are curious about what textbooks leave out. And if one moment in this story stayed with you, the oath, the robe, the punishment, or the betrayal inside the palace, tell us in the comments. Because the next chapter we uncover may begin with a question you choose to ask.